Good night, this is Fumi Sleepy Time Stories. Tonight's bedtime story is about to begin.
Once upon a time, in a dreamy kingdom, there was an earl who had a beautiful wife and a lovely daughter. But one day, his wife fell ill and passed away forever. She was buried in the garden behind their house. The daughter was a devout and kind-hearted girl, but she missed her mother terribly and would cry at her grave every day. When winter arrived, the snow covered her mother's grave with a white blanket. When spring came, the sun melted the snow away. As the seasons changed, so did people's hearts. The earl remarried and brought home a new wife. The new wife came with her 2 daughters. Though they were beautiful on the outside, their hearts were ugly and filled with jealousy. Seeing how kind the daughter was, they often bullied her. At first, they took her dresses, threw away her lunch, and hid her beloved books. But as time went on, their cruelty escalated. The daughter told herself, "They are family, so I must endure." But, in the end, they said to her, "There's no such thing as a free meal. If you want to eat, you must work first. Get to the kitchen and be our servant." With that, they stripped her of her fine clothes and forced her to wear old, tattered garments. The poor girl was made to do all the household chores. Before dawn, she had to fetch water, light the fire, cook meals, and wash clothes, all while enduring the sisters' constant mockery. At night, exhausted beyond words, she had no proper bed to sleep in. Instead, she could only rest by the fireplace. Over time, the ashes and soot covered her completely, making her look dirty and ragged, and so they began to call her Cinderella. One day, the earl was about to leave on a trip. He asked his 3 daughters if they wanted anything. The eldest daughter said, "I want a beautiful dress." The second daughter said, "I want pearls and gemstones." Turning to his own daughter, he asked, "And what about you, my child? What would you like?" Cinderella replied, "Dear father, please bring me the first branch that touches your hat on your way home." When the earl returned, he brought back the beautiful dresses and the pearls and gemstones for his 2 stepdaughters. On his way home, as he passed through a dense grove of hazel trees, a branch brushed against him, nearly knocking off his hat. Remembering Cinderella's request, he broke off the branch and took it home. Upon receiving the branch, Cinderella planted it beside her mother's grave. Every day she visited the grave and wept 3 times. Her tears fell upon the branch each time, and soon it grew into a beautiful tree. Before long, a little bird came to build its nest in the tree. Cinderella often spoke to the bird, and they became friends. Whenever she wished for something, the bird would grant her desire. One day, the royal palace announced a grand 3-day ball to choose a bride for the prince. All the noble, unmarried girls in the kingdom were invited, and the prince would select his future wife from among them. On the first day of the ball, Cinderella's 2 stepsisters were thrilled and eagerly began their preparations. They said to her, "Now help us get ready. Polish our shoes, prepare our hair ornaments and ribbons. We are going to the royal ball." After finishing their preparations, Cinderella couldn't help but feel envious. Her name was also written on the invitation, and she, too, wished to attend the ball. She pleaded with her stepmother, but the woman only sneered and mocked her. "Oh my, Cinderella, you want to go too? But you don't even have a gown, and you don't even know how to dance. How could you possibly attend?" Cinderella continued to beg. And to get rid of her, the stepmother finally dumped a large bowl of lentils into the ashes and said, "If you can pick up all the lentils from the ashes within 2 hours, I'll let you go to the ball." Having said that, she took her 2 daughters and went off to choose their dresses. Cinderella had no choice. She ran out the back door to the garden and called out, "Little birds flying in the sky, come here. Happy little birds. Hurry and fly to me. Everyone, please help me pick the lentils from the ashes." First, 2 white doves flew in, followed by 2 turtle doves. Then all the little birds in the sky chirped and fluttered down, gathering around the pile of ashes. The birds worked together, picking up the lentils one by one with their beaks. At last, the birds finished their task, taking every single lentil from the ashes and placing them neatly into the bowl. It only took them an hour to complete. Cinderella thanked the birds and, filled with excitement, carried the bowl to her stepmother. But the stepmother sneered, "No! You filthy girl! You have no gown and you can't even dance, so you cannot go." Cinderella began pleading again, but the stepmother responded, "If you can separate the 2 kinds of lentils in this bowl within 1 hour, then you may go." She believed this impossible task would finally get rid of Cinderella, and with that, she left cheerfully. Once again, Cinderella ran to the garden behind the house and called out just as before, "Little birds flying in the sky, come here. Happy little birds, hurry and fly to me. Everyone, please help me sort the lentils in the bowl." First, 2 white doves flew in, followed by 2 turtle doves. Then, all the little birds in the sky chirped and swooped down, gathering around the large bowl. The birds worked together, picking up the lentils one by one with their beaks. At last, the birds finished their task, sorting every single lentil into 2 separate bowls. This time, they completed it in just 30 minutes. After the birds flew away, Cinderella carried the 2 bowls to her stepmother. But the stepmother went back on her word and sneered, "Don't come to me again. I will never let you go. A filthy girl with no gown and no dancing skills would only disgrace our family." With that, she took her 2 daughters and left for the ball. Left with no options, Cinderella sat beneath the hazel tree by her mother's grave, crying in disappointment. "Oh, dear hazel tree, please help me. Shake and give me a beautiful gown." Suddenly, her little bird friends flew down from the tree, bringing her a golden gown and a pair of golden shoes. After wiping the ashes from her face and body, she changed into the stunning golden dress and set off for the palace, arriving after her stepsisters. Dressed. In such fine attire, Cinderella looked like a noble and elegant princess. Everyone assumed she must be a princess from a foreign land and was completely captivated by her beauty. The moment the prince saw Cinderella, he was instantly enchanted. He quickly approached her and invited her to dance. The prince was so mesmerized by her that he refused to let go of her hand throughout the evening. As the final chime of the clock signaled the end of the ball, Cinderella suddenly realized how late it was. She needed to return home before her stepmother and stepsisters arrived. Making up an excuse, she bid the prince farewell and quickly left the palace, ignoring his attempts to stop her. The prince hurried after her, but she had already vanished. Disappointed, he returned to the king and confessed that he had met the woman of his dreams, but had forgotten to ask for her name. The king comforted him, saying, "The ball lasts for 2 more nights. Perhaps she will return." Upon returning to the garden behind her house, Cinderella stood before the hazel tree, took off her golden gown and shoes, and let the birds carry them away. Then, she went back inside, changed into her gray clothing, and covered herself with ashes once more. Before the second night of the ball began, Cinderella did not beg her stepmother this time. Instead, she waited until they had all left and then went to the hazel tree saying, "Oh, dear hazel tree, Please help me. Shake and give me a beautiful gown." The little bird came again, this time bringing her an even more magnificent silver gown and a pair of silver shoes. When Cinderella arrived at the grand ballroom, her beauty astonished everyone. The prince, who had been eagerly waiting, immediately stepped forward and invited her to dance. As the final chime of the clock signaled the end of the ball, Cinderella quickly bid the prince farewell and hurried away. Just like the night before, the prince tried to stop her, but once again, he was unable to. When the prince told the king what had happened, the king could only comfort him, saying, "There is still one more night of the ball. Perhaps she will return." Cinderella returned to the garden behind her house, stood before the hazel tree, took off her silver gown and shoes, and let the bird carry them away. Then she went back inside, changed into her gray clothing, and covered herself with ashes once more. On the final night of the ball, after her stepmother and stepsisters had left, Cinderella once again went to the garden and said to the hazel tree, "Oh, dear hazel tree, please help me. Shake and give me a beautiful gown." This time, the little bird brought her an even more magnificent white gown and a pair of glass slippers. When Cinderella arrived at the ball, everyone was once again stunned by her indescribable beauty, and the prince danced only with her. As the final chime of the clock signaled the end of the ball, the prince tried to stop Cinderella from leaving. In her haste to run down the stairs, she accidentally lost her left glass slipper. Though he was unable to keep Cinderella from leaving, the prince picked up the glass slipper and joyfully told the king, "I will marry the girl who can perfectly fit into this glass slipper." Hearing this, the king ordered an official decree the next day. From this moment on, royal messengers will visit every household. The girl who can wear this glass slipper will become the prince's bride. Cinderella's two stepsisters were overjoyed when they heard the news. Since both of them had beautiful feet, they were confident that one of them would surely become the prince's bride. When the royal official arrived at the count's house, the eldest stepsister was the first to go into the room to try on the shoe. However, the slipper was too small for her. Her big toe couldn't fit in. Seeing this, the stepmother handed her a knife and said, "It's fine. Cut off your big toe. Once you become the prince's wife, you won't need to walk anywhere, so it won't matter." The eldest sister found this reasoning convincing, so she gritted her teeth, cut off her big toe, and forced her foot into the glass slipper before stepping out to meet the prince. But as soon as the prince saw her wearing the shoe, he noticed blood seeping out of it. He frowned and said, "She is not the one. Let another girl try." Next, the second stepsister went into the room to try on the shoe. Her toes fit, but her heel was too large to squeeze in. The stepmother handed her a knife as well and told her to slice off part of her heel. She obeyed, forced her foot into the slipper, and stepped forward to meet the prince. But once again, the prince saw blood dripping from the shoe, staining her white stockings red. He shook his head and said, "She is not the one either. Are there any other girls in the house?" The stepmother quickly replied, "No, there are no more." At that moment, Cinderella, who had been standing quietly to the side, finally spoke. "I am also the daughter of this house." As Cinderella stepped forward, her stepmother and stepsisters finally noticed that she had washed the soot from her face and body. She walked gracefully toward the prince and curtsied. The prince invited Cinderella to try on the glass slipper, and the moment she slipped her foot in, it fit perfectly, because it was hers all along. The moment the prince saw that the shoe fit perfectly, He stepped forward and carefully examined Cinderella's feet. Then, he immediately recognized her as the stunning girl from the ball and excitedly declared, "She is the bride I have been searching for." It turned out that the prince not only valued beauty, but also had a particular fondness for elegant feet, especially small, delicate ones that fit perfectly in his hand. And Cinderella happened to fulfill all of his preferences. The stepmother and the two stepsisters were utterly shocked. That breathtakingly beautiful girl from the ball was actually Cinderella? That graceful girl who carried herself like a princess was Cinderella. As the prince helped Cinderella into his carriage, their faces turned pale with rage. That filthy girl, whom they had bullied for so long, was now going to become the prince's bride. The proud stepsisters couldn't accept it, but there was nothing they could do. The prince happily took Cinderella back to the palace, and a few months later they held a grand wedding. Naturally, the count's family was also invited. However, during the banquet, the prince decided to punish Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters for all the cruelty they had inflicted upon her. He stripped them of their noble status and made them palace laundresses. Every day they were forced to wash enormous piles of clothes. Even when their hands were covered in painful blisters, they could not stop. If they did, they would be scolded. At last, they finally understood how Cinderella had felt all those years. From that day on, the prince and Cinderella lived happily ever after.